Today we transform the deepest part of the Black Forest into a beautiful village. Hey everyone, my name is Smitty and today I'm bringing another epic build your way. Whereas my last couple of builds have been grand fantasy type projects, for this project I want to revisit my roots by building something quaint and cozy. Hope you all enjoy, and without further ado, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's get right into it. Every build starts with a search for the right location. My goal here was to create a quaint village hidden away in the Black Forest, a village that was really lush and green as it integrated with the plants and trees around it. Luckily, I was able to find a nice spot completely surrounded by trees, but also level enough that building wouldn't be too much of a struggle. I decided to start out small with this project and just build some simple homes first. I've mentioned this before, but honestly one of the hardest parts of any large project is just getting started. There are just so many options and directions you could take, and it can result in a bit of what I call builder's block. For me, it just helps getting some structures down, and this way I can break the block and start flowing with my process. For this project, I wanted to maintain a primitive feel to my village, so things like thatch and regular wood versus utilizing too much dark wood pieces, stone, or metal. I wasn't going to make this a hard and fast rule, but I like to keep a consistent palette of pieces in my structure so everything looks cohesive and together. I would do some general decorating on the interiors, nothing super intensive, but just enough to give the sense that these are lived-in spaces and preserve the sense of coziness that I wanted to maintain throughout the town. Next, I would work on the landscaping. Like I said, I wanted this town to be super lush and green, so I put a lot of effort into framing these structures with lots of trees, bushes, and other natural elements. As some of you may know from my previous videos, I do utilize a mod called Better Creative to be able to place some of these game assets more easily, but all of this can technically be done with in-game dev commands too, since they're all vanilla assets. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it felt really good to revisit these small, cozier structures that I love to build. I decided to build one more small house, this time just a bit smaller with a flatter roof variation, which allowed me to kick out one side a little bit farther and create an overhang that could be walked under. As always, I did my best to ensure that the sides of the structure had a good bit of depth, and I did this by accentuating the structural beams with an additional layer. I thought it'd be nice to have a little porch in the front, so I quickly built that out. And in the back, I wanted to implement a fire pit just to add another cozy space. With a bit more landscaping on the outside, I was really liking the result. Bringing in some of those natural elements like bushes, trees, and vines can really do a lot for a build. And something about building in the forest biome just really relaxes me, so I was really having a good time with this project. With that, I was happy with my first two homes. Certainly a modest start to the project, but it really helped me flesh out the style of my town. Now it's time to take on a larger structure. I figured every town needs a tavern, so that was next on my to-do list. I imagined the path leading into the town would come down from this hill, and so I thought it would make sense to have the tavern right off this path. As I was building out an outline of the structure, I had the idea that I could actually bridge a section over the slope with a hill. My plan was to have it stilted up, and while not the most traditional design, I thought it would look cool, and would mean I could run a pathway underneath this section of the tavern, adding an additional element of verticality. After filling out the roof, I would do what I could to add some depth and relief to the sides. On builds mostly made of wood, I find that the wooden shutters actually provide a nice texture piece that differentiates itself from the rest. Although it may not make the most sense resource-wise if playing in survival, it's a nice piece to sprinkle in when you can. From here, I just needed to close at the back and ensure that the roofing didn't sit too flat to the side of the building. In this case, a 1 meter lip felt like enough, and then just some additional framing with beams and rooftop pieces as awnings. For the interiors, I decided to put a fireplace in the far wall with a bar counter that extended across. I then decided to cover most of the stone floor with wood as I thought it made the room feel a little warmer. From there, I just needed to add some additional furnishings and tables to really sell the idea that this is a tavern. When laying out my furnishings, I try my best to balance patterns with randomness. At times, patterns and symmetry can work, but you don't want to go overboard. So for instance, you'll see that I try to slightly change the angles of tables, chairs, foods, just to add to the organic feel. For landscaping, I again want to integrate as many natural elements as possible. I wanted to convey an overgrown feel to this town where, although some of the structures have displaced the forest, there are areas that feel partially reclaimed by various trees, bushes, and vines. I think this is a nice element to integrate because it gives the sense of time that has passed in this town, and kind of ages it. With that, I was pretty happy with my tavern. The idea to have the path run underneath the section worked really well, and the overgrowth of the foliage along the path was looking really nice. Not a huge tavern, but a nice cozy spot to grab a drink or bite to eat after a long day of working in the forest. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room. The spot I had chosen for my village actually had a burial chamber right in the middle of it. It's not something I could get rid of, so I had to think of a way to creatively integrate it into the village and its overall story. I figured, you know what, this village has been around for maybe hundreds of years, hidden away in the Black Forest, which means there may be generations of villagers who have lived here. Where are they buried? A graveyard. Since the burial chamber is already designed as a type of forest crypt, I just needed to build out the area around it to visually convey the spot as a mini graveyard. For this, I would utilize a technique that I've done in the past, by which I utilize the stone chests to suggest coffins. I like utilizing the stone chests because they have moss on them, which blends nicely with the forest environment and really gives them an aged look. Again, I utilize better creative to place these since it's not a standard chest, although it is a game asset, but they can also be spawned in with dev commands. The goal here was to go for somber, but not necessarily evil or haunted. I still wanted it to be a nice spot, lush with a lot of green, despite its being a graveyard. Next, it was time to work on some vocation-specific buildings. I figured every village needs a blacksmith of some kind, so I found a spot to start fleshing out a design. My thought for this structure was to keep it very open. I imagine blacksmiths are incredibly hot, and so I thought it made sense to keep it open and not close up all the walls, kind of like a semi-outdoor workspace. When decorating the structure, not only did I want it to feel open, but I also had to think about what tools I would place here. For this, I needed to further think about the backstory of this town. I wanted this place to be peaceful. Yes, perhaps there was the occasional forest beastie, but it's not really a place that really experienced times of war. And for the most part, people lived a quiet existence. And so for that reason, I thought it made more sense to place more tools, like hammers, axes, and pickaxes to suggest that this blacksmith mostly occupied their time with supporting the local workers. A little bit of landscaping on the outside, and my blacksmith was complete. Next on my list was create a butcher shop. This would be another smaller, vocation-specific building where villagers could purchase various meats. My thought was to have 2 floors, with the lower floor being a shop, and then the upper level being a living space. As you'll see, I extended out the top floor of this structure 1 meter beyond the foundation of the bottom floor. This is sometimes present on old medieval style buildings, but sometimes I like to do it just to make the structural composition a little bit more interesting and not as flat. My thought for the area below was, again, to make it more of a shop. So using stairs, I tried to build out a display area and then placed various meats for purchase. I then kicked out a wall in the back so I could fit a small storage room on the bottom floor. And then I did some quick decoration on the bottom floor to make it look a little bit more like a butcher space, and then made a cozy bedroom above. My landscaping process would be the same as the other areas, but I decided I wanted to bring some cobblestone paths into the village. I, however, wanted to be careful not to overdo it with the cobblestone, and I tried my best to break up areas with normal pathing and grass to make it feel splotchy and overgrown. With that, the butcher shop was complete. In hindsight, I realized that this is probably a pretty silly design. I don't know that someone would live above the butcher shop, as I'm sure the smell would be pretty awful, but you know what, we're just gonna ignore that part. Next, I wanted to do a quick modification of the area between the blacksmith and the butcher shop. Initially, I just had this area as another overgrown patch of forest, but after looking at it for a little bit, I thought it could be better utilized. I thought a nice centerpiece would work here, something subtle, like a well. It took a little creativeness to get a design that I liked, but I ended up using a hanging brazier and cooler to make it look like a hanging bucket. End of the day, I was really pleased with this adjustment and thought the area looked a lot better with this. Next, it was time to establish a town hall. I had a nice elevated piece of land towards the back that I thought would serve as a nice place to build. Whereas my other structures were quite small and modest, I wanted this building to stand out from the rest. I started out flattening a large area of land and building out an L-shaped foundation. I then built out some of the skeleton of the structure with iron beams, as I knew I was going to get pretty tall with this build and didn't want to worry about structural integrity. I would later cover them with wooden beams just to keep it consistent with the style of the other buildings. It took some time getting the shape of the structure right, but I settled on a design where there were 2 lower wings that split out from a taller center segment. Again, I wanted this town hall to really stand out from the other buildings, so I decided to add a good bit of height to the middle. From there, it was just a process of closing up the roof and walls, then finding a nice pattern of layering to the sides to ensure that it didn't look too flat. On the inside, I wanted to break this structure up into a couple different sections and floors. Above, my thought is that this could be a throne room or feast hall, whereas down below would be more of a storage room and kitchen. Next, I moved on to the outer areas of my town hall. I had the idea of creating a stage in the courtyard, so I built that out first, integrating some curves to its shape just to make it look a little more interesting. Although I did initially utilize red jute banners on the interior, I realized that the red jute didn't really sit well with me as the color scheme, so I adjusted to green, white, and orange. I did a little more landscaping, adding a thin layer of walls around the courtyard, and my town hall was complete. I thought it really nicely stood apart from the rest of the structures, and it felt a little bit more grand, which was my goal. Since I was in a forest biome, I thought it only made sense to establish some kind of logging camp, so I wandered off a little ways into the forest to establish a small work site. My thought here was to comprise this of two small structures. A structure for workers to rest inside, another one would just be a simple shed that was another outdoor workspace. With the structures complete, now it's just a matter of making the area look like a true woodcutter's work area. To do this, I just scattered various wood and log stacks around the area, and also utilized singular log pieces to create some custom stacks. Not a massive operation, but I don't think you can have a village in the forest without having some kind of logging camp, so it's good to check off that box. With that, my village was coming along nicely. It felt lush, green, and well integrated into the forest, which was my objective from the beginning. From this point, I would just need to add some more simple houses, refine some decorations, and then cue the cinematic.